As someone who is maybe more skeptical about her, I'm actually very satisfied with the proposed legislation that Premier Danielle Smith came out with in order to protect parental rights and ban certain medical procedures and surgeries from being given to minors underneath a certain age. It's very sensible policy. It's a great victory for the parental rights movement, and obviously the left is freaking out about it. And I want to get to it in just a second and explain why the left's sort of rhetoric on this issue was the downfall for them. It's that they acted in such a way that made it so that parental rights actually became more popular, and they can't understand why. And I'm here to explain it to them in their own words. Anyways, but before I get to that, I just want to mention that I, Wyatt Claypool, am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. So if you live on the west side of Calgary, check which riding you live in. And if you live in Calgary Signal Hill, buy a Conservative Party membership. And when the vote comes up for the nominee, vote for me number one on your ballot. The nomination probably won't happen until after April when new riding boundaries come into effect. This is what the new riding boundaries will look like. And I think that it's good for you to take out a membership in this area and vote for me, because I want to propose a parental bill of rights on the federal level. It's great that Alberta, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick are passing parental rights legislation, but I think we can take it a step further and have a federal sensible standard that makes it so that provinces can't do an end run around parental authority in the family. I think that it's a very toxic thing that the left is proposing, that somehow the state should have more say over how your child grows up than you do as a parent. Anyways, getting to the left's reaction, I think the way that they have reacted to this proposed legislation has really been sort of exactly in line with the way they've acted up to this point. They've been nasty, they've been rude, they've just called you names, and they've been taking everything out of context, coming up with wild hypothetical scenarios if parental rights were expected, that people will die, that you're transphobic, that you're homophobic, just nasty garbage. And I think they've gotten to the point in Canadian culture that Canadians do not put up with this anymore. We do not want to hear that we're racist, we're homophobic, we're transphobic, we're bigoted. If we back sensible legislation, we don't care what hypothetical scenarios you cook up. Parental rights are important, and minors should not be taking hormone therapy before a certain age when they don't even know the effects it will have on their bodies. Anyways, here are some of the reactions. It's absolutely nutty, the sort of things that have been coming out. So this guy, Chris Berthelot or whatever, the premier just proposed a literal segregation while mischaracterizing the biology of trans women. This is blatant attempt to erase trans kids and trans people from proper society, treating them as exotic and strange. Nobody is doing that. We are saying that like a male before the age of 15 or before the age of 16 should not be taking estrogen before they've gotten through puberty fully. They shouldn't be taking strong doses of estrogen. It's actually toxic for their bodies, and they are not at the age to make that decision for themselves. And you shouldn't be, before the age of 17, able to go for elective bottom or top surgery. That's insane. But the thing is that these activists online, do not know how the average Canadian thinks. So they think this fear-mongering about segregation, I don't even know what they mean by that, but because of segregation, like we're somehow passing segregation language, and because it's segregation, everyone should be up in arms about this. Here's a post where someone more sensible responded to an activist. He said, did you even watch the video? Probably not. You just want to attack the policy because you don't like Smith. And he's responding to this guy, Marcy Ian, who said, incredibly disappointed to see this. Danielle Smith, these policies are dangerous and intentionally restrictive. They deliberately endanger and isolate trans kids. None of these policies put trans kids at any risk. I don't even believe in the category of trans kids. I think it's actually kind of a sick thing to try and convince a child that if they have any confusion about their gender and they're 12, 13 years old, that they might be the opposite sex. I think that's an actual dangerous thing to do. And this legislation prevents things like gender theory from being taught in the classroom. That is actually dangerous to the mental health of children who are in a very emotional and vulnerable stage of their lives, very impressionable, and cannot filter out political rhetoric from sort of, I guess, scientific type rhetoric that they hear in class. So if in a biology class, if a teacher taught this, you're going to have a lot of kids who just assume that it's fully true and it's not just sort of a theory about how gender works in the real world. Anyways, here is another reaction. Lisa Godhell, Breaking. From now on, members of Alberta's LGBTQ2S community are required to wear pink triangles sewn onto their shirts. We are only doing this because we really love you, insists Premier Danny, comparing Danielle Smith to the Nazis, who made homosexuals put pink triangles on their sleeves the way that they would make Jews wear, like, yellow stars. No, that's not what happened here. The fact that they have to go to such hyperbole to make this basic parental rights legislation seem dangerous is just an indictment of their own worldview, that they only think in 11 out of 10 opinions. It's either you're trying to kill children, you're hateful, you're bigoted, or you're trying to segregate people, you want to erase trans kids. No one's saying this. Nobody's saying this. And this is why Albertans actually support this legislation. This is why in the next federal election or the next provincial election or in a by-election, there's not going to be a large crowd of people showing up to oppose this at the ballot box, because people actually like having some sort of autonomy within their own family to make their own decisions. Obviously, and Danielle Smith even said this in the video, if there was any abuse going on because a child was identifying as transgender within the family, Child Protective Services should be called, or the police, obviously. And the thing is that these activists online are pretending like that option is now no longer available. Because the thing is that they have to pretend it's no longer available to pretend that this legislation is going to result in death or something like that. It's insane. It's just a sick view of the world. Anyways, here's another one. Luke Fevy says, this does nothing to protect all kids and only increases the danger to vulnerable kids. It's BS political pandering on the back of at-risk kids that need to help the most. Kids need to know we love and support them. The hypocrisy is sickening. No, your hypocrisy is sickening because you wanted parents cut out of their children's lives at school. That parents don't get to know if their child wants to identify with different pronouns. Parents don't get to know if their child wants to pursue certain medical interventions. You're the person who's actually a little bit sick. I don't understand why all these activists think that people are just going to go along with them in the idea that the progressive state should have more authority over your children than you should have. These people who likely don't even have children themselves think that they know what's better for your children than you do. They're the people who are out of touch. Here's another one. Faye Johnson. We are being outgunned. We are losing these battles. With kids' lives at stake, trans folk can't win these battles alone. I need folks to finally wake up and to what's going on. A full-on assault on the rights and freedoms of vulnerable young people. Tap in, we need you. There's no right for a 13-year-old to take estrogen or for a 14-year-old or 13-year-old girl to take testosterone. That is not a right. That's actually very dangerous to give to a child when they're at a stage in their lives where they're very unlikely to be identifying as transgender once they become an adult. Every study shows a child in their, like before preteens or when they're in their teens, if they identify as trans, if you do nothing and they get to the adulthood, most of them just identify as their normal sex again. It's actually the progressives who want to do medical intervention that would prevent the child from actually making a well-informed decision. That is actually dangerous. And they're saying, we're losing these battles and we're being outgunned. You're not losing these battles because you're being outgunned. The implication being that there's like grassroots organizations in the conservative movement that's causing these pieces of legislation to get hammered through in spite of public opinion. No, it is because of public opinion that these pieces of legislation are being passed in different provinces. Doug Ford is usually a little bit more of a flake on social issues. The fact that the Ontario government is also going to pass like parental rights legislation shows it's deeply popular, especially in immigrant communities who the left pretends that they are the main arbiters of like saying the opinions of, or like they're the ones who decide what ethnic minority communities think. These people are very, very family focused. They do not like the idea that the state should take precedent over family decisions, over whatever their cultural background is. It's insane. Anyways, here's another one. I'm just going to go through as many of these as I can. So this is Jeremy Apple. He's the faux compassion here as the premier advocates policies that directly harm trans teens is extraordinary. What harm? What harm? And the idea is the hypothetical. This is the hypothetical that a trans child or teen might kill themselves if you do not give them hormone therapies, you do not let them pursue certain surgeries later in their teen years, and you basically let their parents know they want to identify with different pronouns in the classroom. No, they are not going to kill themselves because of this. And maybe you're actually putting children in a more mentally vulnerable state when you're teaching them like radical gender theory in the classroom at a time when they are emotionally vulnerable. When you fill a kid's head with ideas that are just not true, it might put them in a state of being a little bit more on edge, anxious. They don't know what their gender is. They feel left out of like society. And it's in part you guys who are doing that. It's not conservatives trying to go around confusing kids. We want kids to have informed decisions. We want kids to be like to, we want compassion. We actually want some compassion here. Give kids time, be patient, and that's the best way of doing things. The progressives want to rush them along. A split decision, a momentary decision that a child makes that maybe they're not the right gender, and you're like, well, you better take almost irreversible hormone therapy just in the meantime. No, that's actually sick. That's not something that you should be offering to a child. Here's another one. YYC drag defender. Dear conservative women in Alberta, you realize reproductive rights are next. First they come for you, know the rest. No, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. You're just lying. Here's another one. Not enough. Make no mistake. Danielle Smith and the Alberta UCP do not want trans kids to exist in our province. They won't stop trying to erase us. We need to show up Saturday. No. What? How are they erasing you? How are they actually erasing you? They won't give powerful drugs to a child. They're banning top surgeries for 17-year-olds and bottom surgeries. How are they actually erasing people? This is insane. It's nasty rhetoric, acting as if the only reason that people oppose your agenda is because they're bigoted. Or maybe it's because your agenda was insane and people sided with the sensible parental rights legislation and the movement in general. Here's another one. Dr. Christopher Wells. This is the most draconian legislation ever introduced in Canada. It is a full-on attack against trans and 2S LGBTQ plus communities. It is not only immoral, it's illegal. There's no evidence or research to support any of these recommendations. This is ideological warfare. Yes, there is research, idiot. There is research. The kids, if you leave them alone, if they identify as trans in their preteen or teen years, and you let them become an adult and you don't do any medical interventions, you don't do any sort of like hormone replacement therapy or any of this other stuff, they will eventually identify as their normal gender sex. It's not because of social pressure. It's not because people are trying to bully them into doing it. It's because they are at a very, very vulnerable time, anxious time in their lives, and they don't know who they are yet. And when you let them just age a little bit more, they age out of it because they figure out who they actually are. But you're a fool to think that there's no research. The research sides with the parental rights movement. And like the idea that this is the most draconian legislation that we have in this country. Yes, you can't give estrogen to a 15-year-old male. Can't give testosterone to a 14-year-old girl. No, that's not draconian. That's sensible. Ugh, oh my goodness. Here is Kim Seaver, a Antifa leftist who lives out in some small town somewhere in Alberta. He says, anybody who recently claimed that Danielle Smith is LGBTQ plus friendly needs to delete their tweets. No, you need to shut up, because parental rights is actually deeply popular in this province and country as a whole, because people actually don't think that the radical gender theory crowd actually has this all figured out yet. Here's another person, Bradley LaFortune. I don't know. I'm terrible with people's last names. I apologize, everyone. Danielle Smith is rolling back queer and trans rights for youth by a decade with a stroke of a pen. Putting kids at risk like this is incredibly callous and cowardly. I'm going to make a point here. 20 years ago, was there many kids trying to do hormone replacement therapy? How many were there? I guarantee it was probably less than, like, I can count on both hands in the province of Alberta. It's an obvious social phenomenon. That's why, as the rhetoric increases from this crowd of people, from this community, we get more people wanting to identify this way. It's not because there was always a secret percentage of people who were secretly trans throughout history. They'll try and claim that with ridiculous, like, archaeological evidence, but it's not true. It's actually a social phenomenon being pushed by radical progressives who hate every institution in Canadian society, including just the institution of the family and gender as a whole. That's how, like, anti-Western they are. They think that gender is a Western idea, so they attack it because they are leftists. And this is why I fully agree with the opinion of Javier Milei, the new president of Argentina, Javier Milei. He says it in a more colorful way than I'll paraphrase it. But you do not give leftists an inch. because if you give them an inch, they will absolutely take a mile and beat you to death with it. These people would actually say that you cannot have your own children, you cannot raise your own children if you do not affirm the opposite gender they want to identify as. That is insane. Do not respect these people's opinions because their opinions are not respectable at all. Here's another one. Jody Gondek, the mayor of Calgary, 30% approval rate in Gondek. She says the proposed gender identity legislation announced by the provincial government today is an infringement on human rights. What human rights, right, Jody? Name it. Including the right of trans kids and supportive parents who are navigating a difficult journey. What right? What right has been infringed here? You know that children, minors, cannot use tanning beds? And that's for good reason. Minors cannot drink. Minors cannot use cannabis. And you know why? It's because it would hurt their development. It could cause cancer in terms of the tanning beds. There's a lot of things that kids can't do. Kids can't smoke cigarettes for a good reason. They can't smoke like a tobacco pipe, and there's really actually not that much of a cancer risk with that. But there's certain things that kids cannot do because they're not mature enough to make the decision to do it yet. What right? I keep hearing about these nebulous rights that exist that nobody can actually ever show me is a real right. Here is some of the stuff loaded in wrong. Here's Stacey Brosnell. She says, this is not love. This is not supportive. This is something 99% of Albertans weren't asking for. This speaks volumes to trans kids. 1% can decide what happens to your body. I hope this ends up in court. 99% of Albertans didn't want this? Well, I have a poll for you, Stacey. Here's another guy whining about something. He's from the Progress Report, Duncan Kinney. Regardless of whether it's legal or moral, bro, listen to yourself. And he was responding to another progressive basically explaining that you shouldn't be surprised about this because it's deeply popular. In Alberta, the parental rights movement, the idea that parents need to be informed about kids changing their genders or trying to identify with different pronouns in the classroom, the most minor part of this legislation, like when I say the most minor, I mean like the thing that you could maybe get the most parents on board with saying, yeah, you shouldn't have to know in the classroom, because most parents do not support gender replacement, like hormone replacement therapy and all this stuff. It would even be higher if you pulled people on that. In Alberta, that policy of needing parental consent or informing of parents in Alberta, Danielle proposed just informing parents. You don't need consent, but the parents must be informed. It has 78% popularity between those two options, and opposed is only 14%. No, it is not 1% of people cramming down this legislation. It is the vast majority of people cramming it down on the radical community, the radical left-wing community who hates the family, who thinks that somehow gender theory is an appropriate thing to be teaching in the classroom to all ages. No, it's not. And it's because, actually, I think that these policies have become more popular because you guys have been so nasty to people. You guys obviously hate your opponents, and you've been showing it by by ceaselessly name calling people bigots, implying that everyone who disagrees with you is radical, and that they're trying to attack kids or hurt kids, or they don't mind if kids die. No, you guys are the nasty ones. You don't actually care about the health and safety of children because you just want your agenda implemented, implying that it is the epitome of safety. It's not. You guys just hate Western institutions. You guys just hate actual traditional values. That's why you guys want this legislation rammed through. There are tons of people from the LGBT community who have actually supported this legislation. I know a lot of them on social media, and they support it because it's sensible, because you shouldn't be messing with kids when they're 14 years old, and you should let kids be kids. And these people say, well, we want you to let kids be kids. No, you don't. You want kids taught radical theories in the classroom and given hormone replacement therapy if they're anxious at a certain age. That's not compassionate. That's actually deeply bigoted. That's actually a nasty thing to do. That is bigotry against youth. That the idea that kids should not be allowed to work things out for themselves while they're young, and that adults should put them on a train to a specific destination into adulthood that they never chose for themselves. Completely ridiculous. Is this another one? Michael Hetrick, I think he had a good take on this. He says, it's illegal in Alberta for a minor to use a tanning bed. You want there to be less oversight for chemical castration of children than for the same child to get a tan. Make it make sense, in response to the radical NDP MLA Janice Irwin, who is a big supporter of Hamas, by the way. Heather McPherson also came out against this policy, the NDP MP in Edmonton. She's a big supporter of Hamas, and she was mad that the UNRWA got its funding cut because it's obviously a Hamas front group. These people supposedly care a lot about children. They don't care about terrorist groups who use children as human shields and who butcher Jewish children. They're hypocrites. They don't actually care about principle. They have no principles. This is why Javier Milei says, do not give them an inch. They have no limiting principles that stop them from just cramming down more on you. Do not listen to these people. Just take the victory and keep pushing forward, and we can maybe get Canada back to a place of actual sensible social policy. Again, on the federal level, I, Wyatt Claypool, am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. If you live in this riding, buy a membership. On a federal level, we need legislation to make sure that parents, or that, we need legislation to make sure that parental rights are respected. This is not optional that some provinces cannot respect them and some can. It is a fundamental freedom that the family gets to actually make decisions within itself over how to raise their kids. Obviously, abuse is off the table. Call CPSA. If something happens, call the police. But if in a general, the family unit needs to be respected. And because the left hates the family and they think that's just a foolish old cultural value that we use to respect the family, they think that you can just tear it down without consequence. You can't. Anyways, that should be it for me today. Again, go check out my campaign website if you live in Calgary, wyattclaypool.com. You can donate to the campaign there by e-transfer. You just have to include your information of your address, email, phone number, and your full name, just so I know how to bill it to Elections Canada and properly report it. And then also I have a legal fundraiser, also linked in the description, Give, Send, Go. Basically, I'm just fundraising to pay off or pay for a lawsuit defense against some guy trying to sue myself in the National Telegraph for defamation. He's a billionaire. It's a nonsensical defamation suit. He doesn't even have any evidence that he submitted. His evidence was his own LinkedIn profile. It's nothing. He's just trying to bully us with a lot of money and legal bills. So if you can donate there, it really helps us out. And other than that, look into your riding. If there's a nomination going on, buy a conservative membership and vote for the person who will respect parental rights. I'm in a race of 13, 14 other candidates. I would say maybe one or two of us actually stand for parental rights, maybe three. It'd be me, Michael Kim, and Kelly Hopper. If Jeff Watson gets in the race, he also respects parental rights. The vast majority of them don't. They could care less. They just want to talk about getting rid of the carbon tax and that's it, which I think is, in a certain sense, cowardly. If all you stand for is getting rid of the carbon tax, you're not a real conservative. You're just an opportunist who realizes the carbon tax is not popular. Anyways, other than that, I'll see you guys with another video later on. This has been a bit of a rant, but I hope that you at least like me going through this in great detail in terms of the left's reactions.